Yes, yes, absolutely.
Check, 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 check. You got me? Wireless working? Your wireless working? Check, 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 check. You got me? Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good.
Yeah, you should be proud of this
Yeah,
one.
I'm really happy
Of
with
course,
this.
you should be. Good.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, sure.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jared Nicholson. I'm the mayor of Lynn, and it's really my honor to welcome all of you here to the city of Lynn. Thank you so much to our hosts, Lou Minicucci, the Arthur Papathanasi, and shouts out everyone, all the team that were behind this development. It's very exciting to be here. Thank you so much to Governor Baker for being here. It's really an honor to welcome you here. Lieutenant Governor Polito, thank you so much for being here. Secretary Kennealy, Secretary Theoharides. It's really my honor to welcome all of you to the city of Lynn. We're so excited that you've chosen Lynn to make some exciting announcements about the second round of ARPA funding, the economic development bond bill. This is really an honor to have you here. The ARPA funding has created a transformational opportunity for the city of Lynn. And we are working as hard as possible to make the most of that opportunity, working with the city council, ultimately with the community. And I know that Governor Baker, the state legislature, is working just as hard to make the most of that opportunity at the state level. And we couldn't be more excited that they're here in Lynn to highlight that work, to focus on the opportunities that we have in our community to make the most of this opportunity with the ARPA funding. And the economic development bill contains just some wonderful programs that we are so excited to hopefully take advantage of for our work here in the city of Lynn. The Housing Development Incentive Program, MassWorks, One Stop. These are incredible opportunities, and we're very grateful for them. We have a great team in the city that's working on those. Our close partner, the EDIC Lynn, our community development team, our planning department. I know that they have a very busy year planned applying for these grants. So we thank you for keeping them busy, and we're really excited to take advantage of those programs. And we're here today at just a wonderful example of the kind of public-private partnerships that are possible, that it can be facilitated with the state support. You can see that this is a beautiful spot, and we sincerely hope that with the right state support, we can continue to work on bringing these kinds of beautiful developments to the Lynnway, to the waterfront, to our city that generate great returns for the developers that are taking the initiative, making the investment, generate much needed revenue for the city of Lynn, and create opportunities for housing for our residents that are struggling with the cost of housing. And programs like the Housing Development Incentive Program can really help us do that. I so appreciate Governor Baker and his team's commitment to addressing the cost of housing in the Commonwealth, and I think that the City of Lynn is a committed partner in that work. And when you start from the premise that housing is a human right, as well as the reality that cities, like the City of Lynn, the city itself is not generally the one that are building houses, you very, very quickly arrive at a recognition that solutions to the housing issues that our residents have to be developed across sectors, across different levels of government. So thank you so much to Governor Baker and his whole team for your commitment to that issue, to all the issues that are contained in this legislation. Thank you to our state delegation for their partnership, for all of state government, for all that you do to support and deliver for our residents here in Lynn. It is really my honor to welcome and to introduce our neighbor and our governor, Governor Charlie Baker.
Thank you, Mayor. When my kids were younger, I would have been referred to as your rival. I do want to thank you for hosting us today, and I just have to repeat something I said at the groundbreaking, which was I drove by this site for 20 years, and basically it was grass and a bunch of those, maybe 12 of those cement blocks. And I used to drive by it and think to myself, what an unbelievable opportunity for the city of Lynn to put that site to work and to create what would be a tax-generating opportunity in perpetuity. And once I got elected governor, I said to a couple people in our cabinet that before I left office, there would be something going on that site. And one of our cabinet secretaries, Jay Ash, actually said at the groundbreaking that he got very tired of having me call him up and say, I drove by it again today, Jay, and there's nothing there. And this is, in some respects, for me anyway, a great example of what can happen, even on a really complicated project like this one. And it took several years to unwind all the sort of administrivia and the goo and everything else that had made it undevelopable for so long. But we need to do this over and over and over and over and over again, and we need to do it with urgency. First of all, we need to do it because we need the housing. We desperately need the housing. We worked with our colleagues in the legislature, and we're fortunate enough to get very important housing legislation passed that makes it possible for cities and towns to build more housing more quickly. I won't get into the details of that one, but one of our primary partners on making that case was actually Mayor Driscoll in Salem. I used to talk a lot about the fact that the city council voted by simple majority over and over and over again to support housing projects in Salem, which desperately needed them. But a simple majority wasn't enough. You needed 2/3. And we now have, as a matter of law in Massachusetts, a simple majority, all you need to move forward on a housing project. And that has already proven to be an incredibly important tool in the toolbox to get projects done. And I'll say one more thing about the housing thing, and then I'll move on. When Amazon was looking to locate their second headquarters, Massachusetts was one of the 5 states that they determined should be finalists in this effort. And they came and spent 3 days with a lot of folks at the state and municipal level talking about Massachusetts and the opportunities here. And when they left, they said, this is before we got our housing law passed, they said, you don't have enough housing, your housing's really expensive, and you don't have a process or an opportunity or a pathway to create more. So we love your people, we love your institutions, but the housing thing's a big deal for us because we just think you're too expensive. And then they went to New York City, which kind of left us a little surprised, but New York didn't have some of the same constraints on developing additional housing that we did. And then when the New York thing didn't work out, they went to the greater Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. When someone goes to New York City or goes to the greater D.C. metropolitan area because they think they can get more affordable housing there, that's a wake-up call. And the good news is we got legislation passed, we got a tremendous amount of resources from our colleagues in the legislature, and a lot of enthusiasm among our colleagues in local government to put it to work. And that's really, in some respects, what today is about. This legislation is about putting to work state capital resources and federal resources and putting them to work as quickly as we possibly can. And the legislation that we're filing this morning would put $3.5 billion in investments available to Massachusetts cities and towns to support our path forward as we transition into a post-pandemic Massachusetts. An act investing in future opportunities for resiliency workforce and revitalized downtowns, what we're calling Mass Forward, includes $2.3 billion in funding from the Federal American Rescue Act, so-called ARPA, and $1.2 billion in state bond authorizations. These investments will strengthen our state's infrastructure, create jobs, and provides investments in all 351 cities and towns here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts with dedicated project funding or programs in every community. The legislation today would actually direct approximately $27 million to Lynn for a variety of projects that the Lieutenant Governor will talk about in a little more detail. That would be considered the floor, Mayor. A lot of the competitive stuff, you can take the number way up from there. In addition to the federal ARPA funds and the state funds, we believe with local support and locals being able to use some of their federal resources, we think this puts Massachusetts in the best possible position to come out of this pandemic and to do a lot of the really important work we need to do, especially with respect to downtown development as we move forward. The legislation also includes significant resources to continue to invest in clean energy and climate resiliency. We've never disputed the fact that the Commonwealth needs to be very aggressive about converting our energy and transportation and residential operations to clean energy resources, and we've never been shy to point out that there's a tremendous amount of mitigation and resiliency work that needs to be done along with that. This bill includes approximately $1.2 billion in energy and environmental initiatives. Most people know that last fall we proposed about a $750 million Clean Energy Innovation Fund, which would have been the largest investment in the clean energy economy in the country at the state level. And today we're reproposing this fund, but with some very additional significant detail about how we believe these funds should be allocated. And what I would say about this one is, if you think about the COVID pandemic, we did a lot with rules and policies and regulations. But in the end, it was innovation. It was the creation of vaccines that worked and the creation of therapeutics that worked that got us out of this. There's a lot we can do to deal with our climate issues that involve policy, rules, and regulation. But there must be, and there will be, significant innovations that will get us to where we need to go at the pace that we need to get there. And having the state develop this sort of a fund, a clean energy innovation fund, can sit right alongside the life sciences fund we have, the advanced manufacturing fund we have, and some of the other elements we have that have made Massachusetts, and especially in the clean energy space, could make Massachusetts a global leader in innovation with respect to the way we deal with clean energy innovation going forward. It also includes $300 million for the Unemployment Assistance Fund here in Massachusetts. And the reason for that is everybody knows that there's been tremendous pressure brought on our state's unemployment insurance fund as a result of the pandemic. The legislature worked with us to put $500 million into that fund to help pay off the deficit that was incurred. We'd like to add another $300 million to that as part of this, and another $25 million for the Hire Now program, which is oversubscribed at this point, which is a great thing because that program's all about helping people get back to work and matching employers with potential employees. I do want to say one quick thing about this downtown issue. Last year, around this time, actually it might have been more like June, I can't shout over that. Last year in May or June, we issued a Future of Work report, and one of the major findings of that report was that downtowns were going to change and would have to change. That a lot of the traditional sort of commercial activity that took place in downtowns was just not going to be the way it was, especially for those downtowns that relied on, depended on commuters. People have figured out that working from home can work for them, and while there will certainly be some shifts back and forth, there's just no question it's going to be different. And so one of the things we proposed in our original filing last summer was a $250 million downtown placemaking and revitalization program. That didn't make it through the first round of discussions with the legislature, but just recently the legislature issued their report on the future of work, and one of the main conclusions of that report was that, yes, in fact, downtowns are going to have to change. Downtowns will need to be different. They will need to become more about placemaking, and to create and maintain the vitality that they need, they're going to have to figure out a way to put more housing and other alternatives and entertainment opportunities into their downtowns to create the kind of street traffic vitality and commercial activity that I think we all believe is so fundamental to every community's downtown. And this in particular is a big part of the almost $1 billion in economic development that's attached to this bill, which is a combination, again, of both state funds, state bond funds, and ARPA funds. And this is, for all intents and purposes, going to be one of the greatest challenges we're going to face as a Commonwealth. How do we create the vision for every downtown, working with our colleagues in local government, our colleagues in the legislature, and with planners and developers to deal with the fact that downtowns are going to be different? The goal here is to make sure we make them better, that we acknowledge that they need to be different, that we all work together and collaborate, and we come up with plans and strategies and bring state funding to the table alongside some of the local funding that would come out of the ARPA money to make the transition that people are going to need to make the downtowns that probably have a greater percentage of residential than they might have had before, which again helps us deal with our housing issue, and also incorporates a whole variety of alternatives around recreation, hospitality, entertainment, and the like, to deal with the fact that the traditional commute in and commute out, which is what created a lot of the foot traffic and a lot of the downtown commercial activity, is probably not going to be what it was historically. The good news here is there seems to be agreement about this. Now we just need to get to work. And then the final piece I'll talk briefly about is there is roughly $300 million in this for additional housing support. And the mayor talked a little bit about the HDIP program. It's a great program, works really well in communities like yours. We agree. We're going to put additional resources into that program and make it even better for you as you go forward. Housing continues to be one of the most important pieces of our economic development agenda, And it's also one of the most important pieces of our lifestyle agenda here. If we can't figure out a way as a Commonwealth to create a ton of additional housing, workforce housing, senior housing, downtown housing, mixed-use housing, affordable housing, we're going to make it very hard for people in their 20s and 30s to be able to say that this is where they can build the next act. And if you look at some of the data that's been done on migration in and out of Massachusetts, most of the folks who've left over the past few years have been people in their 20s and 30s. And when you survey them and you ask them why, more often than not, the cost of housing plays a big role in that. So we have a big opportunity here. We need to get started. We need to put the certainty associated with these resources to work for the people of the Commonwealth, and especially for our colleagues in local government, so we can start plotting and planning and building and creating and reimagining from one end of Massachusetts to the other. And with that, I will turn it over to the Lieutenant Governor.
Huge. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here in Lynn, in the governor's backyard, in Mayor Nicholson's hometown. It's wonderful to see all of you on our team, including our secretaries, and so many of you who worked hard to see this bill come to a reality in our filing today. It is great to be in a place where, in this case, it was the governor's vision around taking an underutilized site and seeing this as the potential future. And in so many places across our Commonwealth, you'll have a vision and ideas, you'll have plans, but if you don't have the resources to make those plans become real, you can't get the job done. And so it's a perfect place to talk about what happened here, because in our filing today, we can see more places like this developed across our Commonwealth. In this case, these were investments we made through MassWorks program, one of our largest infrastructure programs on Route 1A, to unlock this site, as well as Seaport Economic Council grants, $1 million for this beautiful new infrastructure to shore up literally the North Harbor, to allow for this site to even be in play. And then, of course, you come here, you have these beautiful homes and amenities. You have this mixed income and mixed use project. Down the street, you have new housing, an armory that will be turned into veterans housing, and you have workforce housing, and you have the potential now for a beautiful trail that will connect a lot of the waterfront here in Lynn. And it took a whole lot of work and, of course, state resources to be able to attract private dollars and investment. You know, the Minicucci family having a role to play in this development. But without the plan, the vision, the plan, and the state resources, you don't get the private development to come to the table. So this is a huge success story. We're happy to mark it and use it as an example of why we'd like to see the proposal that we put out today also come to a reality. It's very important, especially with $3.5 billion in investments, both bonding authority plus ARPA dollars. ARPA dollars have a limited time in which they can be used. So by the end of 2026, those dollars have to be used, completely used. And that's why it's imperative for mayors and managers and local officials to work with the legislature to talk with them about making this a reality, so that not only the state ARPA dollars, but the local ARPA dollars be put into play. If we don't put them into play, guess what? The federal government will certainly claw them back, and we won't see projects like this become real. So truly important. As you know, I love all of the 351 cities and towns equally, although we're feeling a lot of love here in Lynn. And in this proposal, each one of them will receive at least $250,000. And I'll give you an example. One of the programs is called the Downtown Recovery Grant Program. It's a $108 million program. 246 communities will benefit from that program alone. And that's a floor, as the governor said, a floor for these communities. Here in Lynn, you heard that number from the governor, $27 million. If it's passed, downtown recovery, parks, MassWorks projects, coastal infrastructure projects, including $13 million for the Lynn Heritage State Park improvements, $10 million for the South Harbor, $2.1 million for traffic and safety improvements at Broad and Washington Street, $1.3 million for a downtown recovery grant, and $283,000 for seawall restoration. I stood over there just a few months ago and see the need to continue reinforcing the infrastructure along the coast here to see more opportunities come to fruition. So those are some real examples. These are real examples that the City of Lynn has identified as needs and priorities in this community. And just think, if they can use these dollars that the state puts into play with their own, how much can happen here in a relatively short period of time. That's transformational. And that's what the forward bill, that's what we're calling it, the forward bill prioritizes, including a total of over 600 items for cities and towns. So many of these projects, and how did we identify these projects? This was an amazing task, but one accomplished by the team here. You recall just 2 cycles ago, we started what was called the One Stop program, which literally consolidated our best development type programs into one stop shopping, one application portal. And we received 360 applications from 260 different organizations amounting to over $303 million in funding requests. But we were only able to fund 196 projects totaling $88.7 million. So there's a lot of projects that communities have envisioned and are planning for, but we don't have enough state resources to help those communities move those projects forward. So those are stranded. Those are the ones that sit on the shelf and don't become real. So this is an opportunity through this whole filing today to expand programs that make sense for communities like the Underutilized Properties Program, the Rural and Small Town Development Fund, the Community Planning Grants, the Downtown Development Grants that the governor spoke about, and to put more money into them so that we can get to these projects. So specifically, $147 million for MassWorks projects, $108 million in downtown recovery grants, $8 million for underutilized property program, $10 million for site readiness, $7 million for brownfields, $4 million for rural development grants, and $1 million community planning grants. There's a lot of resource here, but we have projects already identified that these dollars can be utilized for. So it's not an exercise around, here's a program, let's put out the request and see what comes in. We already know what's out there. It's already come in, and we can quickly put these dollars to work. I'm also really pleased that the Seaport Economic Council, I see Carolyn Kirk here, you've done a lot of work to reshape this program, and others that have devoted dollars to the 78 coastal communities, and we're seeing one of those investments here today. So we're going to reauthorize Seaport Economic Council grants. When we came into office, we added that word economic to the Seaport grants so that we can invest in resilient infrastructure to create more jobs and economic opportunity. These are unique assets that a wonderful state like ours has, so we need to continue to shore up this coastal infrastructure and see more opportunities like the one we're witnessing here today. This was $1 million grant that we made here in North Harbor, and look at the improvements that come with it. So there's some examples. No pressure, Mayor, but you got a lot to fight for. And I know that you will stand as inspiration to your colleagues in local government to help us see this program, this proposal, put before the legislature, advocated for, and hopefully returned soon to the governor's desk for his signature so that we can get to work and do more great things like this today. Congratulations to you. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Secretary Kennealy, who has more good items to identify in this bill.
Oh, thank you, Governor, Lieutenant Governor. Great to be with you and the mayor and the secretary and so many members of our team today to announce the filing of this incredibly important economic development package, an act investing in future opportunities for resiliency, workforce, and revitalized downtowns, or the Forward Bill. And to do it not only in the city of Lynn, but in a building that's brought critically needed housing online at a site that had sat vacant for decades. I'm sorry, guys. Lost my place here. Over the last 7+ years, this administration has put forth 2 economic development plans and proposed and signed 3 economic development bond bills. And we're grateful for our partnership with the House and Senate over this time. The first plan in 2015 was called Opportunities for All, and it led to our filing and Governor Baker signing 2 significant bond bills in 2016 and 2018. After an extensive statewide engagement process in 2019, we developed the Partnerships for Growth strategic plan that informed the bill we filed in 2020, which unexpectedly coincided with the beginning of the pandemic. Today, we are filing legislation that ensures our Commonwealth's growth continues on the trajectory that this administration has set. What you see here behind me tells a story of Lynn, a gateway city, wisely using multiple state investments to unleash economic and community development. We've awarded 5 MassWorks grants to Lynn, including 3 with direct impacts in this part of the city, to unlock development and to better connect the downtown to the waterfront. Most recently, a $2.2 million investment was made in 2020 for street improvements close by to support housing and future transit-oriented development opportunities. And we want to help continue that momentum, and that's why there are key projects funded in the bill that we're filing today. Now, Lynn applied to our One Stop for Growth last year, but the city did not receive all grants requested for no other reason than limited available funding. Among the projects in the bill proposed to be funded is $2.1 million for traffic and safety improvements at Broad Street and Washington Street, right nearby. The Lieutenant Governor highlighted the success of the One Stop for Growth and the demand we saw for a limited amount of resources. This is why we're so excited to file for the reauthorization of MassWorks and the expansion of other key one-stop programs for underutilized properties, rural and small towns, and community planning. We're also proposing to extend the Brownfield tax credits and to change the Brownfields Redevelopment Fund to allow us to do more projects. And speaking of demands on successful programs, I have to mention the Housing Development Incentive Program, or HDIP. Now, over near Central Square is the Vault, the transformation of a former downtown office building into 48 units of market-rate rental housing, just a 2-minute walk to the commuter rail. HDIP made that project possible about 5 years ago. But today, the demand on this program is far more than the $10 million annual cap. Our bill triples that cap to $30 million to support additional projects. This bond bill also prioritizes housing production by reauthorizing $243 million of numerous housing programs, including climate-resilient affordable housing and transit-oriented housing, and it proposes some targeted amendments to support the state's public housing stock. Transit-oriented housing is good housing policy, good climate policy, good transportation policy, and good for local economic development. And so it's natural that we continue to invest in it and support it. And we recently opened the Climate Ready Housing Program that was created in the last economic development bill, and we know that we need to put more dollars behind it, and that's what we're doing in this bill today. Finally, it's important to note that this economic development package also continues to support the growth of the Commonwealth's innovation economy. Innovation, talent, and creativity were all Massachusetts calling cards before COVID-19, and they are key to our success and our competitiveness going forward. The world turned to Massachusetts for innovations to get us out of the public health crisis, and now we are looking at a post-COVID world that poses both new opportunities and new challenges to our leadership. This bill will help us adjust our downtowns to the future of work, to address the housing crisis, to invest in innovation, including emerging clusters like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and robotics, and to position the Commonwealth to capitalize on expected federal investments. Right now in Massachusetts, there are 3 things we've never had more of: urgent needs, collaboration, and available funding. I look forward to hitting the road to talk with communities around the state about how this package moves Massachusetts forward, and to meet with our partners in the legislature to get this done by summer. And finally, I want to thank the many members of my team here today for their great work on the bill, their great collaboration with the Governor's Office, Secretary Heffernan's team, and multiple Cabinet Secretaries. And with that, I turn it over to my great colleague in the Cabinet, Secretary Theoharides.
Thank you, Secretary, and Governor, Lieutenant Governor, and Mr. Mayor. It's terrific to be in Lynn this morning with this view of something I think has been a fundamental tenet of the Baker-Polito administration's approach to climate change, to economic development, to housing. If you protect environmental infrastructure and you invest in it, you can enable something like this beautiful development to pop up here and for residents to have access to a beautiful park and a safe and resilient shoreline. Tomorrow is Earth Day all around the globe, and we at EEA, it's Earth Day every day, but we have been celebrating this month with a particular focus on how our natural resources and a livable climate underpin all of the things that are so great about our Commonwealth. Massachusetts was one of the first states in the country that got into the game of land conservation in a big way. And we know that housing that is near conservation land, housing and businesses that are near bike paths and other outdoor recreational opportunities have higher value, bring in more profits, and are able to be a significant part of their community. We also know that clean air, clean water, these investments are essential to creating a robust economy in Massachusetts and around the country. And so I think it's very fitting that this significant investment, $1.2 billion in ARPA resources, is part of an economic development platform moving forward, because both pieces are so critical to the success in housing and economic development in the Commonwealth. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the specific investments on the environmental side. As I mentioned, there's $1.2 billion, $1.2 billion for environmental resources. I would argue that is the largest investment the state has ever put towards this kind of thing. There are $750 million, as the governor mentioned, for clean energy investments, including things as electric vehicle, rapid charging stations at Logan Airport, the expansion of the Massachusetts Clean Energy Wind Technology Training Center, the only wind technology training center in the country in Charlestown. Over $70 million in investments related to the New Bedford Marine Terminal, the first purpose-built offshore wind terminal in the country, and a greater focus on higher education and workforce training in an effort to support the burgeoning clean energy industry. And to the governor's point about investment, we in Massachusetts are blessed with a tremendous capacity in people and ideas and innovation. The lieutenant governor and I had a chance to visit with a former student from MIT who had developed a virtual reality training platform for offshore wind workers, where it allowed you to put on these glasses. The lieutenant governor did it. I didn't get the chance, but you put on these glasses and you actually feel like you're climbing up a turbine and making repairs to a rotor and a nacelle, and it's an amazing innovation that basically came out of a dorm room at MIT. We want these innovations to be developed here in Massachusetts, and then we want the people who develop them to start companies and stay in Massachusetts. And to create that opportunity, we need not just the investment in these innovations through this fund, but we need the housing to get and keep these people living here. And so again, this is a whole of government approach to these investments. Once operational, these projects will deliver low-cost clean energy to homes and businesses across Massachusetts. We were the first state in the country to get utility-scale offshore wind. We have significant goals on solar and storage and hydro. We are going to bring in those resources, and we're going to create good jobs while we're doing it. We also have funds for workforce training and transitional assistance to ensure expanded jobs and expanded economic opportunities, particularly for disadvantaged communities and environmental justice populations, related to installing clean heating systems, renewable energy sources, and offshore wind. And then we have grants and financing opportunities through Mass Save and other state programs. Outside of the clean energy sector, $230 million will be directed to addressing our state park system and associated infrastructure such as trails and campground expansions. We saw how important these investments were during the pandemic. So many more people got outside, including the governor, to use our great park system. Lynn Woods, local park system. But we need these resources, and we need them not just in some communities, but in every community in the Commonwealth. We know that communities where you could walk to a park were better for people's mental health during the pandemic. Expanding access and opportunity is important for all of us, and the plan focuses on a number of key projects, including $30 million for the Mystic River Bridge Head House, which will further the efforts to construct a Mystic River pedestrian bridge that will connect the cities of Everett and Somerville and the city of Boston's Charlestown neighborhood. Over $20 million has been directed for remediation, resiliency, access, and park improvements to enable the reopening of Gallops Island, which has long been closed due to contamination. And additionally, we're seeking to distribute over $7 million for fishing and boating access projects to get more people outside enjoying our great outdoors. The Lieutenant Governor mentioned the Lynn Heritage State Park, and there we're investing $13 million, which will enable the construction of a climate-resilient park and improvements to our coastal infrastructure. We have another $13 million that will go towards the rehabilitation of 2,000 feet of deteriorated shore protections along George's Island in order to protect this another invaluable natural resource. Drinking water is something I mentioned, and it's a significant part of this package. We have $60 million for water and sewer projects that address combined sewer overflows right here in places like Lynn, and lead service line separation projects to ensure that our drinking water is clean, that our beaches are swimmable, and that our rivers are not carrying dirty, polluted water. $45 million of this funding will go to lead service line abatement projects in 9 municipalities, and $12 million has been directed to CSO improvements in the city of Chicopee out in the western part of the state. I think these investments represent a game-changing opportunity for environmental resources in Massachusetts and for our economic development associated with that. And so we hope to move on these very quickly, but I just wanted to thank the cities and towns who have been involved in lifting up these projects to us. This project list was a partnership between our communities who we hear from so frequently on what their needs are, what their challenges are, and what our administration can do to help them build the communities of tomorrow. And so we are so grateful for this partnership. Thank you all for being here today, and I believe I'm the last speaker. So you want to close it out? Yeah.
Again, I want to thank the mayor and the team for hosting us today. Let me just make one final point here, which is there's no question that the economy globally is still figuring out how to recreate the flywheel of vitality and momentum that it had before the pandemic began. And that's translating into supply chain issues, delivery timeframes that have been extended for months and in some cases years, workforce challenges, and a whole series of other issues. And the point I would want to make in closing this, when people say, gee, this is a lot of money and a lot of projects, we need to get going on this now if we want to get it done over the course of the next few years. Because people who order stuff in the fall of 2022 might not get it until the fall of 2023. And I think one of the things we're trying to say here is many of these communities have done a lot of work to put a lot of projects before us and before their local communities that can happen and can happen soon. What they need is resources and certainty from the Commonwealth. And if we truly want to get a lot of this stuff done over the course of the next 3, 4, 5 years, given all the issues associated with supply chain and delivery times and the global economy generally, we need to get going now. And it may seem far-fetched to say the projects that might take, under normal circumstances, pre-pandemic, 2 years, you need to start on now to have them done by 2026. But I'm telling you, if we don't put a lot of this stuff to work over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, get people to the point where they're ordering things and making decisions about what their rollout's going to look like over the next 3 or 4 years, we could end up down the road 3, 4, 5 years from now competing with countries and communities and states all over the world who waited and are all now part of what will be a very difficult process associated with getting access to the tools and the materials and the people that we're all going to need to deliver on this stuff. We should go as fast as we possibly can to put this in place and get it going, because everything, and I mean everything, is going to take longer than it would have been expected to take if this was happening pre-pandemic. And again, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Mayor, I want to thank you for hosting. And to the folks here who are part of our team, I just want to say thank you to you for all the work people did to put this together. So let's go get it done. Thank you. Say again? So that's a federal issue one way or another, and we obviously will comply with whatever the federal rules are. The one thing I will say is Massachusetts has the highest vaccination rate in the country. We have one of the highest booster rates in the country. I can't say this enough. If you're not vaccinated, you should get vaccinated. If you're not boosted, you should get boosted. The evidence at this point about the power, the efficacy, and the safety of the vaccines is overwhelming. And I am incredibly grateful that people in Massachusetts stepped up and worked hard to get vaccinated. But that opportunity is something people should focus on and recognize and understand. If you got friends or family members who haven't gotten vaccinated or boosted, there's hundreds of sites around the Commonwealth where they can make it happen. All they got to do is ask for an appointment.
Talk a lot about affordable housing. You guys have mentioned a lot of numbers, 13 million, 85
Yeah, yeah.
When someone watches that at home, that means nothing to them. A place like this, when you look at it, you call it, you say it's beautiful. How much is it to live in a place like this, and what's your goal for how much people should be paying a month to live? So don't talk 13 million, talk to me. Is it 2,000? Is it 3,000 a month to live here? So let's hear some numbers that people at home can resonate and think about.
Well, the way I would describe the answer to this one is to say, first of all, we just don't have enough units, period. And we used to build, here's a number people can understand. Massachusetts used to create 30,000 new units of housing every single year from about the end of World War II until 1990. Since 1990, we've averaged somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 units of new housing. Obviously, we have not had supply that's kept up with our population growth, and that's created huge issues around demand, which has driven the price of most housing up dramatically. The focus we've had as an administration has been to build the kind of housing that helps seniors who can't afford anymore to live in a lot of the housing that they had, or who would like to sell the home that they raise their family in and move into something like an apartment. Well, if you don't have a lot of those available, there's no place for them to go. So again, part of this really is about supply. We need to build more senior housing, workforce housing. There's a workforce housing development literally right down the street from here. There are income criteria associated with who can live in that housing. And that housing is designed to be affordable for people who are working people. Affordable housing has rules associated with that as well. We've preserved and built thousands of units of affordable housing since we took office. But the simple truth of the matter is you can't name a kind of housing that we don't need more of. And what I would say is the process that we're proposing today and the resources we're making available would support housing for seniors. It would support housing for working people. It would support housing for people who are first-time home buyers. We made a proposal earlier to the legislature to put $300 million into down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. We got $60 million out of the legislature on that one. We would like to do much more with that program. Part of our goal is to recognize and understand, and most of our resources are targeted here, to populations that are either locked out of the housing market or can't afford to stay in it. Those are the populations, for the most part, we're focused on. But we need every kind of housing.
When you talk about rental, what are some of the, what's an affordable rental to this administration? When you say 30,
Well, part of it depends upon where you live.
2,000?
No, the way, yeah.
1,800, 2,800, 3,200? I mean, what are the numbers we're talking about?
Well, the way to think about it is the housing, the rental rates are a function of median income in that area around the Commonwealth. And most of them typically range somewhere between 30 and 80% of median income. So if you make 30% of the median income of the area you live in Massachusetts, you would qualify for certain kinds of housing. If you make 50%, you qualify for other kinds of housing. And the rental structure on that would be based on what you make. And that's the way we think this should work. We also have, we've doubled the MRVP program, the Mass Rental Voucher Program, over the course of our time in office, which is one of the biggest and most significant rental support programs that we operate. I don't know what the prices are in this operation. What I can tell you is the vast majority of the resources we're talking about would be to support people who make somewhere between 30 and 70% of the median income in their community.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I was going to go there, but I didn't want to confuse it. Thanks, everybody.
Go on and on.